The steel patrol car rolled to a stop in front of my house at precisely 2:15 on a Tuesday afternoon, and I knew immediately that Patricia Hendricks had made good on her threats. I was out in my backyard, checking the pressure gauge on my newly installed 500-gallon backup water storage tank when I heard the car doors slam. The tank sat gleaming in the Arizona sun, a beautiful piece of engineering that I'd spent weeks researching and 2 full weekends installing. I lived in Mesa, Arizona, where water security wasn't just a luxury, it was common sense. We'd had 3 water main breaks in our neighborhood in the past year alone, and I was tired of being without water for hours or sometimes days at a time. "Sir, we need to speak with you," came a voice from around the side of my house. I wiped my hands on my jeans and walked toward the front yard, already knowing what this was about. 2 officers stood on my driveway, looking slightly uncomfortable. The older one, a Hispanic man with graying temples, held a clipboard. The younger officer, a woman who couldn't have been more than 25, had her hand resting on her belt in that casual way cops do when they're not expecting trouble but want to be ready anyway. "Adrian Carter," I said, extending my hand. "What can I help you with?" The older officer shook my hand. "Officer Martinez, this is Officer Chen. We received a complaint about illegal water storage on your property." I couldn't help but laugh. "Let me guess, Patricia Hendricks." Officer Martinez's expression told me I was right, though he remained professional. A concerned citizen reported what they believed to be a safety hazard and potential health code violation. "We're required to follow up on these complaints." "Of course you are. Come on back. I'll show you everything." I led them around to the backyard where my water tank stood. It was a proper commercial-grade storage tank, white polymer construction with UV protection, raised on a concrete pad I'd poured myself. The whole setup had cost me close to $3,000, but it was worth every penny for the peace of mind. "That's quite a setup," Officer Chen said, and I detected approval in her voice. "I've got all the permits," I said, pulling out my phone. "I can pull up the documentation right now." The city approved the installation 6 weeks ago. Everything's up to code. I had a licensed plumber do the connections, and I've got filtration and purification systems in place. Officer Martinez studied the tank, walking around it slowly. "Mind if I take some pictures for our report?" "Go right ahead." While he documented everything with his phone, I explained the setup. The tank was connected to my house's plumbing system through a series of valves that allowed me to switch between city water and my backup supply. I'd installed a first flush diverter for rainwater collection, though that was mainly supplementary. The bulk of my water came from periodic fills using the city supply, treated and stored for emergencies. "This looks completely legitimate to me," Officer Martinez said finally. "You said you have permits." I showed him the digital copies on my phone. He took down the permit numbers and nodded. "This appears to be in order. However, the complainant specifically mentioned health concerns. They claimed you might be storing contaminated water that could somehow affect the neighborhood." That was such a Patricia thing to say. I'd moved into this neighborhood 3 years ago, buying a modest 3-bedroom ranch house in the Mountain View Heights development. It was a nice area, mostly professionals and retirees, with well-maintained lawns and that suburban quietness I'd been craving after years in a Phoenix apartment. Patricia Hendricks had been president of the Mountain View Heights Homeowners Association for the past 7 years, and she ruled the neighborhood like her own personal fiefdom. Our first interaction had been pleasant enough. She'd shown up with cookies and a welcome packet that included the HOA bylaws, covenant regulations, and a cheerful reminder that my first dues payment was due within 30 days. But things soured quickly when I installed solar panels on my roof. She'd claimed they were aesthetically displeasing and tried to fine me, despite the fact that Arizona has right to solar laws that supersede HOA regulations. That legal battle had taken 3 months and cost me $2,000 in lawyer fees, but I'd won. Now she was coming after my water tank. There's no way my tank could affect anything beyond my property line, I explained to the officers. It's completely self-contained. The water is cleaner than what comes out of most people's taps because I run it through additional filtration. Officer Martinez closed his clipboard. Like I said, everything appears legitimate. We'll file our report. If the complainant has further concerns, they'll need to take it up with the proper city departments. After they left, I stood in my backyard and stared at the tank. The afternoon sun beat down, and I could feel anger building in my chest. This was harassment, pure and simple. Patricia couldn't stand that someone in her neighborhood dared to do something without her explicit approval. I didn't have to wait long for the next shoe to drop. That evening, I found a notice stuck to my front door. It was printed on the official Mountain View Heights HOA letterhead, complete with the little mountain logo Patricia had commissioned from some overpriced designer. The letter informed me that I was in violation of Section 7.3 of the HOA covenant, which prohibited external storage containers visible from the street or neighboring properties. I was being fined $500 with an additional $100 per day until the offending structure was removed. The thing was, my water tank wasn't visible from the street. It was in my backyard, behind a 6-foot privacy fence. You literally couldn't see it unless you came into my yard or stood on something tall in a neighboring property, which meant Patricia had been snooping. I called my lawyer first thing the next morning. "Adrian, we've been through this," Marcus Fielding said with a sigh. "The HOA has limits to their authority. You have your permits. The tank is legal." "I know it's legal, but she's fining me anyway. Can she do that?" "She can try. But you'll fight it and win. The question is, do you want to spend the time and money on another legal battle with this woman?" That was the calculation Patricia was counting on. She knew I'd already spent thousands fighting her over the solar panels. She was betting I'd rather just give in than rack up more legal fees. "What if we go on the offensive?" I asked. "She's clearly harassing me at this point." "Isn't there something we can do about that?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Let me look into it. In the meantime, document everything. Every letter, every interaction. If she or anyone from the HOA comes onto your property, make sure you have it on camera." I'd already installed security cameras after the solar panel dispute, but I added 2 more that afternoon, making sure every angle of my property was covered. I also wrote a detailed response to the HOA, citing the specific Arizona state laws that protected my right to install water storage, and noting that the tank wasn't visible from any public area or neighboring property without trespassing. Patricia's response came within 24 hours, and it was a masterpiece of petty bureaucracy. She claimed that Jim Richardson, who lived 2 doors down, had complained that he could see a portion of the tank's top from his second-floor window. Therefore, it violated the covenant. Furthermore, she was escalating the issue to an emergency HOA board meeting, scheduled for the following Tuesday. I showed up to that meeting ready for war. The Mountain View Heights HOA board met in the community center, a beige stucco building near the development's entrance that also housed a small gym and a pool that was closed more often than it was open. The meeting room was set up like a miniature courtroom, with a long table at the front for the board members and rows of folding chairs for residents. Patricia sat in the center seat, flanked by her board members. Tom Winters, a retired accountant who seemed to agree with everything Patricia said. Denise Murphy, a nervous woman in her 50s who rarely spoke. And Robert Chen, a younger guy who'd only joined the board recently and still seemed to have some independent thought left in him. About 15 residents sat in the audience, most of them there because they'd also received violation notices for various trivial offenses. The woman next to me had been fined because her mailbox was the wrong shade of black. "This meeting will come to order," Patricia announced, banging a wooden gavel that was absolutely unnecessary given the room's size and the quiet attention everyone was already giving her. She was exactly what you'd imagine. Late 50s, blonde highlights in hair cut in that severe bob, wearing a pantsuit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. She worked through several other cases first, each one a small tragedy of suburban oppression. The mailbox woman was denied her appeal because she'd painted her box midnight black instead of classic black, despite the fact that the two colors were indistinguishable to the human eye. A young couple was fined for parking their truck on the street overnight, even though they'd done so because they were having their driveway resealed, which the HOA had required them to do. Finally, Patricia turned her attention to me. Case number 47. Adrian Carter, 2847 Desert Willow Drive, unauthorized external storage structure. She said it like I'd built a nuclear reactor instead of a water tank. "Before you begin, Patricia, I'd like to enter into the record that my water storage tank is fully permitted by the City of Mesa and complies with all state and local regulations." I stood and held up a folder containing copies of all my documentation. "This is an HOA matter, not a city matter," Patricia said dismissively. "Your structure violates our covenant." "How? It's not visible from the street or any public area. Mr. Richardson has testified that he can see it from his property. From his second-floor window, by looking over my privacy fence into my backyard. That's not what the covenant means by visible, and you know it." Patricia's face flushed slightly. "The covenant is clear. No external storage containers visible from neighboring properties." "Then everyone with a shed needs to remove it. Everyone with a garbage can. Everyone with a propane tank for their grill. Don't be absurd." "I'm not being absurd. I'm pointing out that you're applying the rules selectively to harass me because I wouldn't remove my solar panels." The room went quiet. You didn't accuse Patricia Hendricks of harassment in public, but I was done playing nice. "This is out of order," Patricia sputtered. "We're not here to discuss your conspiracy theories. It's not a conspiracy theory. You've targeted me ever since I moved in and dared to exercise my legal rights. The solar panels, which Arizona law explicitly protects. Now the water tank, which the city has approved. What's next? Are you going to fine me for the color of my curtains?" Robert Chen, the younger board member, leaned forward. "Patricia, he does have a point. If the structure is city-approved and not clearly visible from public areas, do we really have grounds? The covenant has to be interpreted reasonably," Robert interrupted. "Otherwise, we're opening ourselves up to legal liability." I could have kissed him, but Patricia wasn't backing down. "I'm calling for a vote, all in favor of upholding the fine and requiring removal of the structure." Tom Winters immediately raised his hand. Denise Murphy looked uncomfortable but slowly raised hers as well. "Opposed?" Robert Chen raised his hand. Patricia scowled but didn't raise her own hand, letting the vote stand at 2-1. "The fine is upheld. You have 30 days to remove the structure or face daily penalties." "Then I'll see you in court," I said calmly. "Again." I walked out of that meeting knowing this was far from over. What I didn't know was just how crazy Patricia was about to make things. The next morning, I woke up to find a red tag attached to my water tank. It was from the Mesa Health Department, notifying me that my property was under investigation for potential health code violations related to water storage. Until the investigation was complete, I was to cease use of the tank immediately. I called the health department as soon as they opened. "This is Adrian Carter. Someone from your department tagged my property yesterday. Can you tell me what this is about?" The woman on the other end typed for a moment. "It looks like we received a complaint about unlicensed water storage that may pose a contamination risk to the surrounding area." "Who filed the complaint?" "I can't disclose that information, but it was a concerned citizen. We're required to investigate any complaint involving potential public health risks. I have all my permits. The city approved this installation. There's no health risk." "Then the inspection will show that and we'll close the case. We'll have someone out there within the week." Within the week. In the meantime, I couldn't use the system I'd spent months planning and thousands of dollars installing. I called Marcus again. "She reported you to the health department," he said, and I could hear him typing in the background. "That's actually interesting. Interesting. She's costing me time and money." "Yes, but if we can prove this is a pattern of harassment and that her complaints are baseless and filed in bad faith, we might have grounds for a civil suit. Not against the HOA, against her personally." That got my attention. "How would that work?" "We'd need to document everything. Show that she's knowingly filing false complaints, abusing official processes to harass you. It's a long shot, but if the health department investigation comes back completely clean, especially if they find nothing wrong at all, it strengthens our case that she's acting maliciously. So I just have to endure this, for now, but keep documenting everything. And Adrian, make sure your system is absolutely perfect. If there's even a minor issue, she'll use it against you." The health inspector arrived on Friday afternoon. Her name was Julie Rodriguez, and she was refreshingly professional. She examined every aspect of my water storage setup, took water samples, reviewed my maintenance logs, and inspected the filtration system. "This is actually really impressive," she said, making notes on her tablet. "Most people who install these things don't go to this much trouble. You've got UV treatment, carbon filtration, and sediment filters. You're testing regularly. The tank itself is food-grade polymer, properly sealed. The overflow drains away from any structures. So there's no problem." "Not that I can see, but I'll need to run the water samples through our lab. That'll take a few days. But off the record, this is cleaner than a lot of municipal systems I've seen. You're running this water through more filtration than it gets at the city treatment plant." That should have made me feel better, but I knew Patricia wouldn't give up just because the facts weren't on her side. The lab results came back the following Wednesday. I got the call from Julie Rodriguez herself. "Mr. Carter, your water is not only completely safe, it's actually cleaner than the city supply in several metrics. Lower total dissolved solids, no detectable coliform bacteria, lower chlorine levels because you're filtering it out." I don't know who complained about this system, but they were either misinformed or acting in bad faith. Can I get that in writing? I'm emailing you the full report right now. As far as the health department is concerned, this case is closed. There are no violations. Your system is exemplary. I immediately forwarded the report to Marcus, Patricia, and the entire HOA board. The email to Patricia included a brief message. "The health department has cleared my water storage system. Please remove the fine and cease further harassment." Her response came within an hour. "The HOA violation stands. This is a covenant issue, not a health issue." That's when I knew she'd gone too far. She'd filed a complaint with a government agency, wasting their time and resources, knowing it was baseless. That wasn't just petty HOA politics. That was abuse of the system. Marcus agreed. We can work with this. Let me draft a cease and desist letter. We'll lay out the entire pattern of harassment and warn her that if she continues, we'll file a civil suit for harassment, abuse of process, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The cease and desist letter was delivered by certified mail on Monday. Patricia signed for it at 10:30 in the morning. By 2 that afternoon, I had a response, but not the one I expected. She filed a formal complaint with the Mesa Police Department claiming that I had threatened her. This time, 3 officers showed up at my door, including Officer Martinez from the first visit. "Mr. Carter, we need to talk about some allegations," he said, and his tone was much more serious than before. "Come in," I said, my heart pounding. "What's this about?" "Patricia Hendricks claims you've been harassing her, that you sent her threatening communications, and that you've been surveilling her property." I almost laughed. "That's completely false. I have security cameras on my own property because she keeps filing false complaints against me. I've never threatened her. The only communications I've sent have been formal responses to her HOA violations. She provided us with a letter that she claims is threatening." Officer Martinez showed me a printout of the cease and desist letter Marcus had sent. "This isn't from me, it's from my attorney. And it's not threatening. It's notifying her of potential legal action if she continues filing false complaints. That's protected legal communication." Officer Chen, who'd been with Martinez on the first visit, spoke up. "Sir, we looked into this before we came. We pulled our prior reports. You've been pretty cooperative. Miss Hendricks has filed 3 complaints about you in the past month alone. We also contacted the health department. They told us your setup was exemplary and that the complaint was baseless." Officer Martinez nodded. "We have to follow up on every complaint, but between you and me, this looks like a civil dispute that she's trying to turn into a criminal matter. That said, I need to advise you to have no direct contact with her. Everything goes through your lawyer or official HOA channels." "Understood." "Absolutely." After they left, I sat in my living room trying to process what was happening. This had spiraled way beyond a simple HOA dispute. Patricia was now actively trying to get me arrested. I called Marcus immediately. "She's escalating because she knows she's losing," he said. The cease and desist rattled her. "But filing a false police report is serious, Adrian. We might have more than just a civil case here." "What do you mean?" "Filing a false police report is a crime in Arizona. If we can prove she knowingly made false statements to the police with the intent to harm you, that's criminal. We'd need to document it carefully, but we might want to consider filing our own complaint. Against Patricia. Against Patricia. For harassment, filing false reports, abuse of process. We build the case methodically. Every false HOA violation, the baseless health department complaint, now this. We show a pattern. It was tempting, but I hesitated. That feels like it would just make everything worse. Maybe. Or maybe it finally puts an end to this. She's counting on you to back down. People like her always do. They're used to getting their way through attrition, wearing people down until they give up. What happens when someone doesn't give up? I thought about it for a long moment. All right. Let's do it. But I want everything documented and airtight. If we're going to do this, we do it right. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus and I built our case. We compiled every piece of documentation. The initial dispute over the solar panels, including Patricia's letters explicitly threatening fines despite the Arizona Solar Rights Act. The water tank violation notices, despite city permits. Her complaint to the health department, now definitively proven false. her false police report, contradicted by the officer's own investigation. We also did something else. Marcus hired a private investigator to look into Patricia's conduct as HOA president. What we found was stunning. Patricia had been running the Mountain View Heights HOA like a personal ATM. The investigation revealed that she'd been approving payments to vendors for work that was never done, many of those vendors being companies owned by her husband. She'd been billing the HOA for consulting fees that were never authorized by the board. She'd collected thousands in fines, but the money didn't always make it into the HOA accounts. It was embezzlement, plain and simple, and it totaled over $150,000 over the past 5 years. "This changes everything," Marcus said when we reviewed the investigator's report. "This isn't just harassment anymore. This is serious financial crime. We need to take this to the police and the Arizona Attorney General's office." I felt a strange mix of vindication and concern. I just wanted to store some water. Now I was about to blow up someone's entire life. "Are you sure about this?" I asked. "This is going to get really ugly." "Adrian, she stole from everyone in your neighborhood. She's been abusing her position for years. And when you threatened that by standing up to her, she tried to destroy you. This isn't about revenge. This is about accountability." He was right, of course. This had stopped being about me a long time ago. We filed a formal complaint with the Mesa Police Department on a Monday morning. Marcus had prepared a comprehensive package, including all of our documentation, the investigator's findings, and expert analysis of the HOA financial records. We requested a meeting with the detective division. Detective Sarah Williams took our case. She was a sharp woman in her 40s who specialized in financial crimes. She reviewed our materials for almost an hour while we sat in a conference room at the police station. "This is detailed work," she finally said. "You've done half our job for us." "But I have to ask, Mr. Carter, what's your interest here? This looks like it started as a personal dispute." "It did," I admitted. "She's been harassing me over a legally installed water storage tank." But when we started digging into why she was so fixated on maintaining control of the HOA, we found all of this. I don't want my neighbors being stolen from, and I don't want someone who's willing to abuse the system like this to have power over anyone. Detective Williams nodded slowly. "Give me a week to review this and consult with the DA's office. If everything checks out the way it appears to, we'll move forward. In the meantime, do not contact Miss Hendricks. Don't talk about this investigation with anyone in the neighborhood. This is now a police matter." That week felt like a month. I went to work, came home, checked my water tank obsessively even though it was working perfectly, and tried not to think about what was coming. I'd started all of this just wanting to be prepared for water emergencies. Now, I was at the center of a criminal investigation. The HOA board meeting scheduled for that Thursday was going to be interesting. I had no intention of missing it, even though I knew Patricia would probably try to have me removed. The meeting room was more crowded than usual. Word had gotten around that Patricia was going after someone again, and people were interested. I recognized most of my neighbors, including Jim Richardson, the guy who'd supposedly complained about seeing my water tank from his window. I made a point of sitting next to him. "Jim, can I ask you something?" He looked uncomfortable. "Sure, Adrian. Did you really complain about my water tank to Patricia?" He shifted in his seat. "She asked me if I could see it from my bedroom window. I said I could see a little bit of the top if I really looked. I didn't think she'd use that to fine you. I don't care about your water tank, man. I think it's actually pretty smart. Did she ask you to make a formal complaint?" "She showed up at my door with a paper already written, said she just needed my signature." I probably shouldn't have signed it, but you know how she is." I knew exactly how she was, and soon everyone else would too. Patricia called the meeting to order at precisely 7. She looked tired, I noticed. The stress was getting to her, even if she didn't know yet what was really coming. She worked through the usual business, most of it mundane approvals for landscaping and repairs. Then she got to new business. "We need to discuss our ongoing legal expenses," she said. "Due to certain residents' unwillingness to comply with our covenants, the HOA has been forced to spend significant funds on legal counsel. I'm proposing a special assessment of $500 per household to replenish our legal fund." The room erupted. $500 was a lot of money for most of the families in Mountain View Heights. "Is this about Adrian's water tank?" someone called out. "This is about maintaining the standards of our community," Patricia said primly. I stood up. "This is about Patricia's personal vendetta against me because I dared to challenge her authority. She's tried to fine me for legally installed solar panels. She's tried to fine me for a city-approved water storage system. She filed a false complaint with the health department, which has now completely cleared my system. She even filed a false police report trying to get me arrested. And now she wants all of you to pay for her legal fees." "That is a gross mischaracterization," Patricia started. "Is it?" "Because I have documentation of everything I just said. The health department report explicitly states that my water system is not only safe but cleaner than city supply. The police investigated her complaint against me and found it baseless. And the city permits for both my solar panels and water tank are public record." Robert Chen leaned forward at the board table. "Patricia, is this true? Did you file complaints with the health department and police?" "I had legitimate concerns about community safety." "Did those concerns prove to be valid?" Robert pressed. Patricia's face was turning red. "The health department's opinion doesn't change the fact that he violated our covenants." "Actually, I'd like to see the legal opinion that says his water tank violates the covenants," said a voice from the back. A woman I recognized but didn't know well stood up. "I'm Veronica Norton. I'm an attorney, and I've lived here for 12 years. I've been reviewing our covenants, and I don't see how a water storage tank, completely contained within someone's private backyard and permitted by the city, violates any of our rules." "What's the legal basis, Patricia?" "The covenant clearly states," quote it please, "section and subsection." Patricia fumbled with her papers. "Section 7.3, external storage containers visible from neighboring properties. And his tank is visible from the street, from Mr. Richardson's second-floor window." Veronica Norton looked at Jim Richardson. "Jim, stand up. Is that true?" Jim reluctantly stood. "I can see like a few inches of the top if I lean out my window and crane my neck. Patricia asked me if I could see it. I shouldn't have said yes." "So to be clear," Veronica continued, "we're talking about a properly permitted water storage system in someone's backyard behind a privacy fence that can only be seen by deliberately looking down into his yard from a second-story window. And you want to fine him for this and charge the rest of us $500 to fight the legal battle." When she laid it out like that, it sounded as absurd as it was. "I move to vacate the fine against Adrian Carter and dismiss this matter," Robert Chen said suddenly. "All in favor?" "You can't just," Patricia sputtered. "I'm a board member. I can make motions." "All in favor of vacating the fine," Robert raised his hand. Denise Murphy, looking relieved, raised hers as well. "That's 2 votes," Robert said. "The fine is vacated. Meeting adjourned." Patricia looked like she was going to explode, but there was nothing she could do. She'd been outmaneuvered in her own meeting. I wanted to feel victorious, but I knew the real battle was still coming. Detective Williams was out there right now, building her case. Everything that had happened tonight was just a preview. I didn't have to wait much longer. On Tuesday morning, Detective Williams called me. "Mr. Carter, I wanted to give you a heads up. We've completed our investigation and we're moving forward. We'll be executing a search warrant on Miss Hendricks' home and HOA office this afternoon. We're also issuing an arrest warrant." "What charges?" "Embezzlement, theft, fraud, abuse of public resources, filing a false police report. The DA is going big on this. She's been stealing from your entire neighborhood for years." "What should I do?" "Nothing. Stay away from the situation. We'll handle it. You'll probably be called as a witness eventually, but for now, just sit tight." The news spread through the neighborhood by that evening. Police cars had shown up at Patricia's house at 4 in the afternoon. She'd been led out in handcuffs while detectives carried boxes of documents from her home office. Her husband was also arrested. Apparently, he'd been complicit in the whole scheme. My phone started ringing with calls from neighbors. Everyone wanted to know what had happened. I kept my answers vague, following Detective Williams' instructions to stay out of it. The next HOA board meeting, 2 weeks later, was a completely different affair. Patricia and Tom Winters were both gone, having resigned their positions. Denise Murphy had been elected interim president, and she'd immediately hired an independent auditor to review the HOA finances. The auditor's report was devastating. Patricia had stolen even more than our investigator had found, nearly $200,000 total. She'd been falsifying invoices, paying herself consulting fees, and directing work to her husband's companies at inflated prices. The HOA was essentially broke. "We're going to have to implement a special assessment," Denise announced sadly at the meeting. "We need to replenish our reserves and pay for the legal costs of recovering what was stolen. It's going to be about $800 per household." The room groaned, but people understood. This was Patricia's doing, not the current board's. "However," Denise continued, "we're also going to be completely restructuring how the HOA operates. We're implementing financial oversight requirements, mandatory audits, and board term limits. This will never happen again." I raised my hand. "I'd like to propose a change to the covenants. I think we should remove any rules that allow the HOA to regulate things that are already regulated by the city. If someone has a city permit for something, the HOA shouldn't be able to override that." Robert Chen nodded. "I second that. And I'd like to add that we should require HOA approval of any fines over a certain amount. No more presidents acting unilaterally." The proposals passed almost unanimously. The neighborhood was ready for change. Patricia's criminal trial took place 8 months later. I was called to testify about the harassment campaign against me and how it had led to discovering the financial crimes. The prosecution argued that her need to maintain absolute control of the HOA was directly tied to hiding her embezzlement. Anyone who challenged her authority risked exposing what she was doing. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Patricia's defense attorney tried to argue that the financial irregularities were honest mistakes, that she'd been overwhelmed and disorganized. But the evidence was overwhelming. There were too many mistakes, all of which benefited her financially. The jury deliberated for 3 days. They found her guilty on all counts. At sentencing, the judge was not gentle. "Mrs. Hendricks, you held a position of trust in your community, and you violated that trust systematically for years. You stole from your neighbors, and when one of them dared to stand up to you, you abused your authority and the legal system itself to try to destroy him. This court takes these crimes very seriously." Patricia was sentenced to 5 years in state prison and ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA. Her husband, who'd been convicted as an accomplice, got 3 years. Their assets were seized to pay back what they'd stolen, but it still wouldn't cover everything. I attended the sentencing. I wanted to see it through to the end. When it was over, I walked out of the courthouse into the Phoenix sunshine feeling like a weight had been lifted. My phone rang as I was getting to my car. It was Veronica Norton, the attorney from the neighborhood. "Adrian, I wanted to thank you." "For what?" "For not backing down. Most people would have just removed the water tank and moved on. You fought, and in fighting, you exposed something that affected all of us. That took courage." "I just wanted to store some water," I said with a laugh. "Well, your water tank saved the neighborhood. How's it working, by the way?" "Perfectly. I've used it twice during water main breaks. Both times, I had clean running water while everyone else was waiting for the city to fix things. Best investment I ever made. I'm thinking about installing one myself. Would you mind giving me some information about your setup?" "I'd be happy to." Over the next few months, 7 other families in Mountain View Heights installed their own water storage systems. I helped several of them with the planning and installation. It became a neighborhood thing, people taking control of their own emergency preparedness. The HOA, under new leadership, even added a section to the community website about water storage systems and how to install them properly. They included information about permits, best practices, and links to the health department guidelines. What had started as a point of conflict became something the community embraced. I ran into Jim Richardson at the grocery store one Saturday afternoon. He looked sheepish when he saw me. "Adrian, I never got to properly apologize for signing that complaint." I should have pushed back against Patricia. "It's fine, Jim. You were in a tough spot. I'm getting my own tank installed next week. I talked to the same contractor you used. He said you'd already told him I might be calling." I had. Word of mouth was keeping that contractor busy. "You'll love it. There's something reassuring about knowing you've got backup water. Makes you feel prepared. Patricia used to make fun of you, you know. Called you a survivalist nut behind your back. She also stole $200,000 from us and tried to have me arrested on false charges. I think I'll survive being called names." Jim laughed. "Fair point. I heard she's trying to appeal the conviction." "Her lawyer can try, but the evidence was pretty solid. She's done." The appeal was denied 6 weeks later. Patricia was transferred to Perryville State Prison to begin serving her sentence. I didn't follow her case after that. I'd moved on. The neighborhood had moved on too. The Mountain View Heights HOA was actually functioning the way an HOA should, maintaining common areas, organizing community events, and staying out of people's business beyond what was absolutely necessary. Denise Murphy turned out to be a good president, focused on service rather than power. I'd even joined the board myself, serving a 1-year term as treasurer. We implemented transparent budgeting and published quarterly financial reports online. Everyone could see exactly where their dues were going. It was refreshing. My water tank continued to perform flawlessly. I'd started tracking water quality metrics as a hobby, testing both the city supply and my stored water regularly. The health department had been right. My water consistently showed better quality than what came straight from the city, thanks to my filtration setup. I even gave a presentation about it at a neighborhood meeting, showing my testing results and explaining how the filtration system worked. Several people asked detailed questions. A few seemed genuinely interested in understanding the science behind water purification. One evening, about a year and a half after Patricia's sentencing, I was out in my backyard performing routine maintenance on the tank when my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, but I washed my hands and went to answer it. A woman in her 30s stood on my porch, looking nervous. "Are you Adrian Carter?" I am. Can I help you? My name is Melissa Hendricks. I'm Patricia's daughter. I froze. I hadn't expected this. I'm not here to cause trouble, she said quickly. I just wanted to talk to you if you have a few minutes. I invited her in, wary but curious. We sat in my living room and she spent a moment gathering her thoughts. I want to apologize for what my mother did to you. I know it doesn't mean much coming from me, but I'm sorry. She was wrong about everything. You don't need to apologize for her. I know, but I wanted you to know that not everyone in my family supports what she did. I actually testified for the prosecution. I gave them access to records from my father's companies. I helped them build the case. That surprised me. That must have been difficult. It was the right thing to do. My mother stole from people. She tried to destroy you for no reason except that you wouldn't bow to her. That's not okay. I couldn't stand by and watch her get away with it. How is she doing? I asked, not sure why I cared, but feeling like I should ask. She's angry. She still doesn't think she did anything wrong. She thinks you orchestrated some conspiracy against her. She's appealing, but her lawyer says there's no chance. The evidence was too strong. I didn't want any of this. I just wanted to store water for emergencies. Melissa smiled sadly. I know. My mother made enemies out of people who should have just been neighbors. She saw everything as a threat to her control. It destroyed her life, destroyed my father's life, hurt all of you. I'm working on making restitution beyond what the court ordered. I want to help pay back what they stole. That's generous of you, but it's not your responsibility. Maybe not legally, but morally. I benefited from that stolen money. They paid for my college, helped me buy my first car. I didn't know it was stolen at the time, but I still benefited. I'm working with the HOA to set up a payment plan. We talked for another half hour. Melissa was thoughtful and sincere, nothing like her mother. She'd built a life separate from her parents and was trying to do the right thing now that their crimes had come to light. After she left, I sat in my living room thinking about everything that had happened. A simple water tank had unraveled an entire web of corruption and abuse. If Patricia had just left me alone, she might have continued stealing for years. Her need to control everything had been her downfall. I walked out to my backyard and looked at the water tank gleaming in the evening light. It was just a tank, just a practical solution to a practical problem. But it had come to represent something larger. The right to make your own choices, to prepare for your own future, to stand up against unreasonable authority. The tank held 500 gallons of water, cleaned and filtered and ready for any emergency. But more than that, it held proof that sometimes doing the simple, sensible thing is an act of rebellion. And sometimes that rebellion changes everything. I checked the pressure gauge, noted the reading in my maintenance log, and went inside. Tomorrow, I had 3 neighbors coming by to look at my setup and ask questions about installing their own tanks. The week after that, I was scheduled to give another presentation at the community center about emergency preparedness. Patricia had tried to make me an example of what happened when you challenged her authority. Instead, she'd made me an example of what happened when you stood up for what was right. The neighborhood was better for it. People were more engaged, more prepared, more willing to question authority when it overreached. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Saw the appeal was denied. Justice served. Beer to celebrate. I texted back agreeing to meet him at our usual place. I'd buy the first round. He'd saved me thousands of dollars in the long run and helped expose a serious crime. More than that, he'd been a steady presence through all of it, never suggesting I back down, always pushing forward. At the bar, we settled into a booth and ordered. "So what's next for you?" Marcus asked. "Any more battles with HOAs? God, I hope not. I just want to maintain my house, store my water, and live in peace." You know, other people are going to start coming to you with their HOA problems now. You're famous in a very specific, very niche way. He was probably right. I'd already gotten emails from people in other neighborhoods asking for advice on fighting their HOAs. I'm not looking to become some kind of anti-HOA crusader. Maybe not. But you've proven that standing up to them works. That's valuable. A lot of people think they have no choice but to comply with whatever their HOA demands, no matter how unreasonable. They usually don't have someone willing to dig deep enough to find real crimes. Patricia got caught because she was actually stealing. Most HOA presidents are just petty tyrants, not criminals. True, but the principle is the same. Know your rights, document everything, don't back down when you're right. We drank to that. 6 months later, the HOA held a community barbecue. It was a beautiful April evening, warm but not yet Phoenix hot. The whole neighborhood turned out. Kids played on the community center lawn while adults mingled and ate burgers and hot dogs. Veronica Norton approached me with her husband. "Adrian, we wanted to show you something." She pulled out her phone and showed me a photo of a brand new water storage tank in her backyard, nearly identical to mine. "We got it installed last week, already filled and filtered. The installer said we're the 14th house in the neighborhood to get one." He called it the Adrian Carter effect. I laughed. "I'm not sure I want an effect named after me." "Too late. You started something. People are thinking about preparedness differently. We had a neighborhood fire safety workshop last month that was packed. Someone organized a first aid training. You reminded people that we don't have to be helpless. We can take steps to protect ourselves." Her husband added, "And you proved that the HOA isn't some unaccountable authority. It's supposed to serve us, not control us." That was an important lesson. As the evening went on, I found myself thinking about the chain of events that had brought us here. A decision to install a water tank had exposed corruption, sent criminals to prison, reformed an HOA, and inspired a neighborhood to think about emergency preparedness. All because I'd refused to back down when I was right. The sun set over the desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. My neighbors chatted and laughed around me. Children ran past chasing each other. It was peaceful. It was normal. It was what a community should be. Robert Chen found me near the grill. "I'm glad you joined the board this year. We need people who aren't afraid to push back. I'm just trying to make sure we don't have another Patricia situation." "We won't. Too much oversight now. But more than that, people are engaged. They're paying attention. That's the real protection." He was right. An HOA could only become tyrannical if people weren't paying attention. Patricia had counted on apathy. She'd ruled through the assumption that no one would look closely at what she was doing. I'd looked closely. And everything had changed. Later that night, back at my house, I did my evening check of the water system. Everything was perfect. The tank was full. The filters were clean. The pressure was right where it should be. It was routine maintenance, the kind of thing I did without thinking now. I thought about Patricia in prison, still angry, still convinced she'd been wronged. I wondered if she'd ever understand that she'd done this to herself. Probably not. People like her rarely accepted responsibility, but that wasn't my problem anymore. She was behind bars, the neighborhood was thriving, and I had clean water ready for any emergency. Sometimes, the good guys actually won. I went inside and poured myself a glass of water, not from the tank, just from the tap. But knowing I had that 500-gallon backup sitting outside gave me peace of mind. I was prepared. I was secure. And I'd stood up for myself when it mattered. My phone buzzed with an email from someone in Chandler, another Phoenix suburb, asking for advice about fighting their HOA over a solar installation. I sighed but opened the email. Maybe Marcus was right. Maybe I was going to become the anti-HOA guy whether I wanted to or not. But as I read the email and started drafting a response about documenting everything and knowing your rights, I realized I didn't really mind. If I could help someone else avoid what I'd gone through, or give them the courage to stand up for themselves, that was worth something. The water tank sat outside, doing its job, quietly preparing for emergencies that might never come. And I sat inside, living my life, secure in the knowledge that I'd done the right thing and that justice, eventually, had been served. Sometimes the simplest decisions lead to the most complicated consequences. But if you stand firm in what's right, if you document everything and refuse to be bullied, truth has a way of coming out. My water tank was cleaner than city supply. The health department had proved it. And now, Patricia was in prison, the HOA was reformed, and my neighborhood was better off. I took another sip of water and smiled. It tasted like victory.